Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. I hope you guys had a good New Year's and all of that, and hopefully 2022 will be nice. 2022, Jesus. But today we're going to talk about Dorothy Day. I've done a lot of research about Dorothy Day previously, so I know my things about her. But it's not very easy to make a video about her, I feel. There's a lot to her, and I mean a lot to her. And just talking about one concept that she talks about is a lecture in and of itself. So I do recommend you check out Dr. Laurie Johnson. She does different lectures about Dorothy Day and compares them to different ideas. It's golden if you want to learn more. But now you wonder, well, who is this Dorothy Day? Well, let's just say this. You have Anarchism and you have Catholicism. Usually, these two ideas don't work together. Most anarchists throughout American history and even European history has gone against the church. And for example, if we take a person like Mikhail Bakunin, he even goes into Satanism to describe the horrors of the Catholic Church and organized religion together and how they control and put people away from what is natural to them. But Dorothy disagrees, because Dorothy thinks that God and anarchism goes hand in hand. And I'm here today to tell you why, some of the ideas she has, and how the structure of the Catholic Worker, which is her organization, worked.
How do you understand anarchism? What's the idea of the Catholic Worker concerning anarchism?
Very much interested in anarchist thought because a man like Peter Kropotkin wrote a book called Fields, Factories, and Workshops. And he believed that all reform should begin from the bottom up rather than from the top down. And living as we are in a totalitarian era of Hitler's, Mussolini's, Stalin's, why?
The structure of the Catholic worker movement kept itself to a minimum. Dorothy never wanted a global movement that would be a specific change within the Catholic Church. It started in 1933, just like a newspaper, and renting out some houses for a low price. The house was just so Dorothy and Peter, which I will talk about later, could write in a newspaper they called the Catholic Worker. Dorothy and Peter during this time also volunteered by giving people food during the Great Depression. This later turned into a movement that Dorothy did not expect. People heard rather quickly and they needed help, so many people came to the Catholic Worker to seek food and help. What houses she rented out became the center of the movement, which she spent time with a small community of mostly people who needed help. Dorothy was living in the houses together with the poor people, and everyone in the houses followed a daily routine. Mass in the morning, then reading and writing. Go into the kitchen to prepare food, then distribute that food for the people who queued up where the Catholic Worker would be giving everyone fooding and clothing. Dorothy Day is seen as one of the American theologians for her work within the Catholic Worker, her autobiography and her diaries. Focus on the poor, understanding the relationship between God and the poor, and to create harmony between belief and behavior that one gained from dealing with others. Trying to understand that Jesus cared about the poor and not with the focus of gaining money and property. Dorothy did not have the idea of starting a Catholic Worker until she met Peter Morin. Peter is everything Dorothy lacks, and he cares for knowledge. He was a Frenchman who left French because of his pacifistic ideas, and he leaves instead of undertaking military service. Dorothy Day herself, with the focus of love and the theology about God's love, and with the focus of the ambition of Peter Morin, could start this movement. Peter was the main inspiration of the early days of this movement. While Dorothy had a history of anarchism and communism, it was Peter who made the paper The Catholic Worker come through. Peter was very personal, ambitious and optimistic. This was also shown in the people's support to the Catholic Worker. Many of the followers of the paper even protested against Nazism in Bremen, in Germany. They gave out the papers to communists who later started calling themselves Catholic Worker. These men destroyed a swastika from a ship and got arrested. The way you plan for the future is how you teach and form yourself. These people formed movements all from America, Mexico, and Germany. And these people distributed the paper and volunteered to help. Some people even took action to take political action, to join rallies and shout at the people that they should read the Catholic Worker. These people did not last more than a few years, and they created quite negative press. In the later stages of the Catholic Worker, Peter and Dorothy started supporting people creating their farms. An example of one of these farms is created in Massachusetts, and they paid $1,000 for 100 acres of land with a farmhouse on that land. This farm had 2 men in charge. Many of the members wished for a communal experience, but there were conflicts within this farm, mostly because of the differences of the ideals of the 2 men. They later abandoned the project and moved to Boston. Another example of a farm with another conflict of ideas is an Eston farm. There's a conflict of land ownership. 3 families started it, but 2 of the families left after a year, and the last just a few days longer until they could move back into the city. The church gave Dorothy a chance to challenge her own ideas, and a sacrifice is made to keep the church rituals, everything from the Mass to prayer, while someone can spend time doing things that will feel better for oneself. She chose to act for the will of the church. These rituals were made without looking up the claimants that the Catholic Church made, and she just followed what she knew about the rituals. This with the help of the love of God. Dorothy claims God gives love to one another, and one can see Christ in other people. Action within the community from the members is essential, from voluntary help of works needed around the apartment, but also choosing the voluntary choice of poverty. They also wanted you as a member to stay away from luxuries such as radios, cars, movies, and cigars. One should only buy what is essential for the community's need. This is also an idea that was pushed on the farmers in the later years of the movement. Peter wanted personalism and communitarianism, so the focus should never be on what the person owns, but the personal character and his relation to the community and what he does for the community. Bam, shaka, bam, bam. Pardon the low energy here. Just having bad time at work. It's not great. But yes, here is where we come to it. That was the introduction of the entire movement. I have a lot more written down, but I'm gonna skip because it's long enough and the energy is not high. But here we come with personalism again. So we talked about it in the Din Brothers one. That was their focus on the Catholic personalism. And here it comes again. Personalism. It is the focus of the personal character. You know, if you want to look into what more personalism is, I go into detail in the South Vietnam episode. But here we see that the anarchism and personalism of Catholicism goes hand in hand once again. Catholicism and anarchy works together as long as the focus is on the individual.
Say, how is the Catholic worker run? Well, a person has authority because, not because he's been put in a position of authority. Everybody's a volunteer, but the person who, just by his very ability, takes over a situation is the authority, you might say. He's an authority on what he's doing. The person who knows how to bake bread automatically becomes the head of a baking project.
What happens when conflicts arise and when someone says, I can make bread better than you?
Well, if there's going to be a conflict, they can go ahead and take 2 separate tables and each make their own bread. Take turns on the ovens, but we happen to have 2 ovens, too. No, there's the right to secession. That reminds you of the Quakers.
Yeah.
I went up to speak at a place in Westchester, and there were 2 Quaker meeting houses, not very far apart. And I said, what is this? Is this a hall or something of that sort? And they said, no, there was a disagreement between the 2 groups, and so they seceded and built another meeting house. So in an anarchist group, if there's a difference of opinion, why, the group was split.
From each according to his ability to each according to his needs. It comes with that again. If you're not able to cook really well, then don't be a cooker. Then do something else and provide the community with what you can give to it, your personal character and what that can give to the community. So it has to be functional, obviously, but nothing is forced. It all has to be voluntary. The focus is on the individual's ability to give to the community. Even if we look at modern day Catholic worker, because there are different rental places around America in which you can get help by the Catholic workers. But the thing here is, it's also according to the ability of the workers themselves, and they take a lot of risk helping people in need, because yes, it can turn out really badly and they can get injured or worse. but it is according to their ability to help the community at large. And if we look at the time this was created, it was during the Great Depression. Dorothy and Peter had an ability. It was either writing or having that apartment in New York. So what ability they gave to the people. The needs of the people was met through Peter's and Dorothy's abilities. And what I find very interesting here is I think Dorothy is what an anarchist should be. Yeah, she can be a bit radical in her youth, but she becomes more calmer later on. And it's according to her abilities to give. But if we look at people like Hasan Piker, as you know much of, his socialistic mindset, which is take from the poor, buy a mansion. Hasan has an ability, which meaning money, to buy up apartment blocks, for example, which he could rent out for a very cheap price. Obviously, you have to get something from it, so you can pay utilities. But it's not for the idea of profit, it's just for the idea of keeping it going. So instead of buying a mansion, Hasan could have bought housing to help with the needs of the poor. But that wasn't done. So it's not according to his needs or the poor's needs. He had the ability, but he never did it for the needs of others, which makes you a bad socialist. But it also goes into the ground-up principle. So Dorothy here knew she had the ability of just helping a few people. But with just helping a few people, the sort of grassroots of that, it changed a lot. A lot of people saw it and tried it themselves. With mixing results, obviously. But the idea is, if you can do something successful with the small things that you do have, it gives inspirations for other people to do the same. Because life for Dorothy wasn't bad in this Catholic worker. It wasn't horrible. You didn't see her live in misery. She had all the needs of herself met, which was usually to teach God's love. That was her need. And once that is met, you don't need much more. She's willing to give whatever she gets above the needs of her own to other people and their needs. And during this time, people were starving in the streets. So just a simple thing like giving food helped thousands of people with barely any cost of her own. And communitarianism is the focus of the connection between the individual and the community. So that goes hand in hand with personalism, which we just talked about. But here it is, you are an individual in an anarchist sort of setting, which is the Catholic worker, the anarchist setting. But you're an individual that helps the community at large. So it's a community filled with individuals with their own abilities to give to the community itself. And as long as you have God's love with you and the grace of God, anything is possible. It's possible to change. And Peter has a bit of a special view as well. He views that people need to learn how to desire poverty and hard work with the help of God. Because it's only with God you can understand the value of labor. Because it's only through God's pure love you understand why. Just with the material you will never understand why something has to be done, why labors can be a good thing, but why you don't need access material wealth. So the view is God, that God is the center of the community. Without God, it's not possible. God and community are the same, and individualistic goals such as materialism is frowned upon. I want to take this quote from the Catholic worker and Dorothy Day's writing. What we would like to do is change the world. Make it a little simpler for people to feed, clothe, and shelter themselves as God intended them to do. And by fighting for better conditions, by crying out unceasingly for the rights of the worker, the poor, and the destitute, the rights of the worthy and the unworthy poor, in other words, we can, to a certain extent, change the world. We can work for the oasis, a little cell of joy and peace in a harried world. We can throw our pebbles in the pond and be confident that its widening circle will reach around the world. We repeat, there is nothing we can do but love. And, dear God, Please enlarge in our hearts to love each other, to love our neighbor, to love our enemy as our friend.